Hello and welcome to One on One. I'm Vernon Ramazar. My guest today is an actual longtime friend, Georgia Popplewell, who is the Managing Director of Global Voices Online. Georgia, lovely to have you here in person, not virtually, since
lovely to be
you
here,
exist in the other world of new media, which is in fact spreading rapidly. And it's becoming a cause of some controversy, of course, because we were just speaking before the program, people who view the whole blogging thing or Twittering thing as being highly suspect and not to be treated as actual information.
Right.
It's not real journalism. Where does it fit in the sphere of journalism?
Well, I think it's information. It's information that can at times be accurate, can be useful, can be inaccurate, can be misleading. But I think that is a characteristic of information in general. I think if I were a journalist, I would want to, and I am, I'm a writer, I've written for the media, I am a member of the media as far as I'm concerned. I also happen to be a blogger and an online
serial
animal.
blogger, yeah.
But I would treat the information I gather from blogs and things like Twitter as I would treat, an eyewitness report or a man in the street interview. It's information, and I think it has to be engaged because it's there. The internet isn't going away, and also it has changed the landscape of journalism in a way that I would want to be alert to.
Has it improved the landscape, giving us a wider access to different points of view, perhaps?
That would depend on one's point of view. I think
there's a lot of noise out there as well, isn't
exactly. I think it's made the job of journalists more complicated. It's made the job of media outlets more complicated as well, because there's also an expectation in the new Web 2.0 read-write web landscape. There's an expectation that you're having a conversation with your, the New York Times, for instance. You leave a comment on their blog, and you kind of expect that that's going to be received and somehow processed. Some people do it well. They're media outlets who are engaging with citizens well. Here in Trinidad, C News Live, your competitor, they actually use Twitter quite a bit, and actually I see them interacting with users on Twitter. Certainly they're foreign media outlets that have been doing it for quite a while.
But even with some of the prominent ones like the New York Times, for example, which I read fairly regularly on their blogs and their comment section, you get the sort of idea of people just going there to flame.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It degenerates into this sort of back and forth fighting, which really doesn't accomplish much.
The thing is, it's another job, moderating comments, and I think the decision anyone who puts their material online has to make is whether or not they're going to moderate and jump in and manage, or just let it kind of degenerate or take on a life of its own. Because in some cases you get very productive discussions in the comment section. The New York Times seems to have taken the point of view that they're just going to let people talk among themselves there, which is, I guess, is fine. A moderated discussion probably is more desirable if the person who wrote the article would actually respond, and you see that happening sometimes. But it's hard. I mean, if you're a journalist, you're having to do research stories, write them up. Then if they're going online, you may have to make certain modifications, and then you have people coming to you and saying,
and you can't check at 3 o'clock in the morning and things like that for comments.
Exactly. So it has made life more difficult, but in a way more interesting. And I've seen journalists engage. For instance, Alan Rushbridger from who's the editor-in-chief of the Guardian newspaper in the UK. He says, Twitter for him it's a method of crowdsourcing. You can put a question out there and get responses. Sure, some of them will be, not very useful, but some will, because there are some very, very smart people using Twitter, including journalists. It's also a good research tool. He says that if he friends or links to key people on Twitter, on a morning, those people will have already read the things that he needs to read and be sharing them on Twitter. So,
Twitter is a strange creature. In fact, you introduced me to it because I was a serial blogger. I've broken myself of that habit. But it's basically just little updates on what you're doing, 140 characters or less, is it?
Yeah.
Which drives me to distraction, but...
It's actually Not necessarily updates. They could be things you're sharing. I mean, I
You
use
send
Twitter
out
a lot
URLs
to
all the time, yeah.
Yeah, I use Twitter to share a lot. I've actually eliminated a lot of the, I'm drinking water right now, or
Right, I'm going to the bathroom.
I'm going to the bathroom. That, to me, is not terribly interesting, and not things I choose to share. But I use Twitter a lot to share information and to find information. Breaking news, for instance, is that's the situation where Twitter has been sort of proven to be useful.
I think when the plane crashed in the Hudson,
When the plane crashed in the Hudson,
Twitter broke it, yeah.
The very, very, very first reports came from Twitter, and the very first images, they came through Twitter. And because when an incident like that occurs, a journalist is unlikely to be the first person
On the
scene. So it will probably be an ordinary citizen. We saw the Mumbai attacks as well. I was online that day. It was the afternoon, and I was ready to kind of wind things down. And I saw these things coming in on Twitter from some of my friends in India, my Twitter friends, and personal friends as well. And that's how I knew this thing was happening. And I then kind of Googled a bit and found out that there was actually some reporting starting up. I think ieTV was who have been actually slammed for some of their reporting. They had started reporting pretty early, but yeah, the very first reports were coming in.
So new media has the immediacy that regular media doesn't have.
Yes.
Because it's basically unmoderated. Anybody can just send anything up.
It's unmoderated. It's unfettered by systems and guidelines, which is one of the things that journalists who haven't embraced new media kind of rue that.
I mean, there are all kinds of weird experiments. I was listening to the BBC the other day. Somebody actually converted all of Shakespeare's works into tweets.
Yeah, people are doing some really interesting experiments. There's a woman who's putting out recipes in 140 characters or less.
Isn't that an odd limitation to have, though, for human beings? We like to express sometimes, and sometimes our thoughts can't be easily conveyed with nuance in 140 characters.
Yeah, there are technical reasons for that. For instance, I was reading an article the other day about why an SMS message is limited to 160 characters, and there's actually a kind of technical limitation that was put in place very early, and it had to do with the kind of state of the art at that point, and it's kind of remained that way. I'm not too sure what the origins of the 140 word limitation are on Twitter, but I think
it helps their bandwidth, certainly.
It helps with bandwidth. I think it was also a way of just kind of distinguishing it from blogging, where you can go on and encapsulate things. And it's an interesting limitation. You sometimes you struggle to kind of cram.
I was doing that last night, actually. I was trying to reply to you about something, about the interview, actually.
Yes.
And I had to sort of drop words and characters I thought, okay, they're not really necessary. I leave out the and, for example.
Right, or use an ampersand, or
right.
That kind of thing. And you don't necessarily have to. I am actually not fluent in SMS speak. I'm actually not a digital native, so actually I shouldn't.
And you're kind of a purist, because the other day you were saying you were trying to put something that you had to use American spelling, which apparently